Hi, it's John. And I just thought maybe everything's okay because I was grinning. Not so. Everything is not okay. That smile was for the purposes of the YouTube algorithm. And the YouTube algorithm may want to promote videos higher which feature grins. Or it may not. Well, I guess we'll find out. What AI thinks and what reality is two different things. Because the truth is, there is no more reason to smile now than there was a year ago, 2 years ago, or 5 years ago. 5 years and a few days, when the hacked cell tower nightmare began. Now, maybe it began before, courtesy of other rogue hackers or perhaps governments or terrorist groups around the world. I don't know. But in terms of the cell towers that affected me, that began on December 31st, 2020. So that's just 5 years and a few days now. And as it's mid-January now, 2026. And as I've said before, more evidence of hacked cell towers is coming. And how do I know that? Well, because I know that sooner or later truth finds an audience. Truth reaches the masses, whether it's through my campaign or others. As it was with tobacco in the 1950s, when almost everybody thought it was healthy, but even then there were a few voices saying, no, it's the opposite of healthy. And they were ridiculed, and within a few years, a few decades, they were proven to be correct. And so it is with the cell tower issue. Make no mistake about it. This is not going away. This is just going to get broader and broader. The amount of people that find out about it, the amount of coverage it gets in alternative media and eventually in mainstream media. So just recently, in the last couple of days, from several different news sources, I came across more evidence that cell towers are indeed dangerous, okay? And one of the stories was citing a town in West Virginia in the U.S. that is a no cell tower zone. No cell towers allowed, no cell phones allowed. I guess you don't need cell phones if you don't have cell towers. So no cell towers, no cell phones. They even banned microwave ovens in that town. Wi-Fi, it's all banned. So there are actual laws in that town prohibiting anyone from using or installing any wireless services, okay? So that's a great start. Now, why do you think that is? Why would that occur? I'll tell you why, because some people got together, people like myself, who suffer from EHS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, got together and moved to that town and probably became part of the local government to pass those laws. Okay? And why did they move there? Well, because a lot of them were no doubt affected by hacked cell towers. Some of them, I'm sure, were affected by regular cell towers because within the group who have EHS, which is approximately 4% of the population, anywhere, pretty much any country around the world. It's around 4%. Some countries it's a little bit more, some countries it's a little bit less. Whether it's 2%, 4%, 7%, either way, it's a small percentage of the population, but that represents a lot of people. Tens of millions of people around the world. And so in this town in West Virginia, I'm sure a lot of those people moved there because of the symptoms that they had, especially headaches, okay, including migraines, all right. I'm sure a lot of them moved there because of those symptoms, and a lot of those symptoms were caused by hacked and jacked up cell towers. Now, some of them might have been caused by regular cell towers because, as I said, not everyone has the same sensitivity level even within that set of people who are extra sensitive. There's a subset of people who are even extra or extraordinarily extra sensitive. Those are the types of people that are bothered even by Wi-Fi if they're in a room with Wi-Fi. I'm not one of those, but there are those people who do exist. And then there's other people who are bothered by cell towers, even if they're like, say, 10 stories below a cell tower and it's not being hacked. Well, most people who have EHS are not going to be bothered by cell towers if they're not hacked, but they will be in special circumstances, and that includes myself. For example, when I went to look at a particular apartment that I was considering renting a number of years ago, maybe around 10 years ago or so, an apartment in downtown Toronto. It was on the top floor, and before I entered that building, I noticed the cell towers on the roof, and so in the back of my mind I was thinking, I wonder if that's going to cause a problem, because I'd heard somewhere or read somewhere that some people were bothered by cell towers if they lived on the top floor of a building where cell towers were positioned on the roof, so right above their suite, right? And sure enough, I went to look at the apartment, considering renting it, and within being in there for about 1 minute, I started getting a headache. And so I said, no, I'm not going to rent this. And as soon as I got back down, my headache went away, and it never came back until December 31st, 2020, which is when the cell towers started being jacked up, at least the ones in my area. And I did a fair bit of traveling in subsequent years, and so I know that it wasn't just my area that they were hacked, in which they were hacked. Anyway, so some of those people in that town might have moved there just because they were affected by regular cell towers, not because they lived on the top floor of the building that had cell towers above, on the roof, maybe even 10 stories below if they're extraordinarily extra sensitive to electromagnetic radiation. But I'm sure a lot of them were affected by hacked, jacked up cell towers. Because in my travels in the last couple of years, I've traveled to a lot of different areas in North America, and I had the headaches in all those areas. And I know how my body works. I know the types of headaches I get, and they were caused by electromagnetic radiation, because it was the exact same types of headaches that I got before when I used a cell phone against my head without a headset years ago. Then I discovered that I was electromagnetically extra sensitive, and I started using a cell phone with a headset only, a wired headset. Kept the phone a few feet away from me because the radiation from a cell phone, unlike a cell tower, the strong radiation extends only about a foot, at the most a 2-foot radius from the phone's antenna. And I know that because my friend many years ago tested a cell phone with a Geiger counter, and as he pulled the Geiger counter or EMF detector away from the antenna of the cell phone, once it got to about 12 inches away, it dropped down to basically zero. And so maybe with the newer phones, 4G and 5G, it might be strong even at 2 feet away, but not beyond that. I know because anytime I've used a cell phone since, I've kept it 2 feet away from me, and I've never gotten a headache from it before. And other than cell phones or cell towers, I can count on one hand how many headaches I had in my life before that. So I'm not a person that's prone to headaches, not natural headaches. Okay? So when I get headaches, I know they're not natural. And the cell tower headaches have the same type of sensation that the headaches had when I used the cell phone against my ear. Again, like I said, before I started using a headset. So again, I'm not the only one. You got a whole town here in West Virginia that has the same problem. So now it's a cell-free zone, cell tower-free zone. And by the way, cell towers obviously transmit a signal much stronger than cell phones. That's why even if you're far away from them, you don't have to be just a few feet away from them, or like with a cell phone, or less than a foot away, like you do with a cell phone to get a headache. No, obviously cell towers transmit much stronger signal than a cell phone. That's why they could affect you. Even if you're 10 feet away, or for some people even 100 feet away. But for all extrasensitive people, if the tower is jacked up, in other words, if the frequencies or wattage output of the tower is jacked up by the hacker. And the second story is about a woman, I believe she was in her 70s. I just read this yesterday or today, and she's in her 70s, and she moved into her car because that was the only way she could get far enough away from a cell tower that she realized was giving her symptoms, especially headaches and also nosebleeds. And I've had nosebleeds and ear bleeds too, and that's in some of my previous videos in this playlist. And by the way, these stories I just told you, on the next video I'm going to show you screenshots of everything I said in this video. Okay, so you can read the stories on the screenshots, do your own research if you want. Okay, but I'm not going to be talking during the screenshots. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. For these, I'm just going to have a series of screenshots on the next video, and all of them will be referring to everything I've said in this video. So yeah, there's one other thing about that lady in her 70s who moved into her car. Again, she knows how her body works, and she knows that it's the cell tower that's causing the problem, because when she's in her car, when she's living in her car, she moves far away from the cell tower so that it doesn't affect her. Okay, so in her case, she's living somewhere where there's only a few cell towers away, and so she can move far enough away from a cell tower so that she doesn't notice the symptoms anymore, because the signal weakens the farther you get from it, even if it's a jacked up signal. If you get far enough away from it, it will not affect you. But the reason I strongly suspect that that tower is jacked up, and in other words, it's affecting her because it's jacked up, not because she's one of these extraordinarily extra sensitive people. She is obviously electromagnetically hypersensitive, but not extraordinarily hypersensitive, because she said that until she moved into her car, the symptoms just got worse and worse. They got progressively worse. That tells me that the cell tower is hacked and jacked up, okay? Because if it was just functioning normally, the symptoms wouldn't get worse. She would get the headaches anytime the tower transmitted. She would get the headaches, right? And normally those towers transmit the same, one day as they do the next day on average, right? Basically, same or similar amount of people are using the tower for communication purposes, and if it was just those signals that were bothering her, her symptoms wouldn't have gotten progressively worse. The reason they got progressively worse is because the hacker was jacking up the signals more and more. And that's why my symptoms got progressively worse in the last couple of years, because the hacker jacked it up more, stronger frequencies, stronger wattage output, okay? And obviously it's the cell towers, because when she moved into her car, far away from that tower, her symptoms went away totally. So this is just more evidence, what I told you, that cell towers are indeed the big menace that I said now for years that they are. So you'll see the screenshots for everything I just mentioned in the next video. Thanks, bye.